Hello and welcome to our wasmCloud community call for April 29th, 2026. We have a fairly short agenda today. Eric's been working on refactoring our templates for TypeScript and Rust, so I figure we'll start there. I wanted to have a discussion around an issue that I put in yesterday that I'm collaborating with Colin on, and I want to make sure that we think this is the right approach, and then we can get started on it and bring it into the roadmap. And then afterwards, just generally walk through our roadmap and do kind of a status overview. So first, I'll pass it off to Eric.
Thank you. Thank you. So I just want to take a few minutes to walk through some updates both in our template space and in our language support documentation. So these changes really started because we've got a really nice fleshed out TypeScript language guide now. We've got a lot of really solid TypeScript templates that we can start from for a component project. But our TypeScript guide has gotten way out in front of our other languages. So we want to bring the Rust language guide into parity with this. And there are also some new details to add, talking about things like when you want to use wstd versus when you want to use some other approaches. So we started building out our Rust templates to try to bring them into parity. And in the process of doing that, realized that we had a bit of a naming issue because in wasmCloud we have the service model as one of the elements of a workload, but we were also calling some of our templates services, and these were not actually wasmCloud services. We were using that in a slightly different way. So Billy and I talked about it a little bit, and we came to the conclusion that handler was probably the better terminology here for where we were using service before. So for our stateless components, kind of what you think of as a standard component in our template files repos here, you're going to see we're using the handler terminology now. And we've got a PR up introducing several new handlers to the Rust repo that lives in our monorepo at wasmCloud. So you'll see those landing pretty soon. And that's going to give you most of the same building blocks that we've got here in the TypeScript repo. Other than that, pretty soon you will see interface guides landing in the Rust language support section, walking through how to add these different interfaces, how to add these different pieces of functionality to a Rust component as well. So when each of these PRs lands, we should be in a pretty good place with our Rust language support documentation, and we can start thinking about other language ecosystems, and also seeing if there are pieces that we don't have in both Rust and TypeScript that folks might like. I'm curious to just kind of open the floor here. Are there any interface guides that folks would like to see? Are there any major, voices that are not into the handler terminology? Because that is, something we're implementing right now. It's open for discussion. Just kind of curious if anyone has any asks or feedback on our template approach right now.
Yeah, and in the chat, I posted a link where we got the name handler as well. So in WASI P3 for wasi-http, the interface is called handler basically for what we're implementing. Now, it does also have a service world which you could target to say like I'm a thing that has this handler essentially. So service could work, and I could definitely still argue for it easily. But I figured disambiguating is probably the move here. Um, yeah, interested in feedback on that. Also, other big call out. We're getting a lot of PRs and outside community contributions. If folks give me a hand on reviewing some of these things, greatly appreciated. Even if you maybe aren't like a doc maintainer yet. Um, and people coming in and saying I've looked at it and this looks great to me. Like I tried it out. That like helps me, alleviate how detailed I'm going to be on just bringing it through and getting it approved. We're starting to get a bit of a backlog, and so just let people know that contribution by looking at reviews, even if you're not yet a maintainer, is very welcome and appreciated. Um, and also on that note, I also want to highlight that we have new maintainers. I should have done this last week because I got it all in last week after we did a governance docs rev, bringing in the governance docs that we provide for the CNCF TOC. As part of us being an incubating project, we have a maintainers MD where we keep track of who's in what maintainer group. And I want to congratulate Aditya for becoming basically a core maintainer now. He's in the WASH maintainers list, as well as Pavel, who we've also moved up the contribution ladder as a WASH maintainer. Jeremy Fleitz, who's been our key maintainer for the runtime operator, is a Go maintainer. And so folks who are coming in and making contributions know, like, we've got a contribution ladder, and we'll when you want to kind of like move up that ladder, talk to us. We really want to keep growing the project. We're getting a lot of people building on top of it right now, like I said, and outside contributors. So more maintainers is better. So yeah, thank you and congrats, y'all. Any questions for Eric on any of the other kind of docs you want to see before we move on to the next topic? All right. I will bring up the GitHub issue that I filed last night. Um, Slowly, maybe. Uh, it is. I'll just share my screen here. So this is something that we wanted to add as part of V2, but we eliminated it from the scope because we did have a way to work around this by doing a host interface with WASI config. So you could basically pass in configuration values when you're doing wash dev with it, but it wasn't ideal, and we knew that. But some of these things can be a little tricky. And so this is something that Colin ran into while he was, as one says, developing an anger when exercising a project. And so as he was working on building out the web GPU demo that he built, he ran into like wanting to be able to just pass in environment variables, completely reasonable in his watch dev loop. Now, when you think about that, though, it can be tricky. There's a bit there where you want to really think about the security considerations for that. And so we want to make sure we do the right thing there. Now, there's quite a lot of prior art in the space. I captured some of the big ones that are very similar to us, and all of that is kind of in here. But basically, at a high level, the idea inside our wash config YAML today, all we have is basically build and dev. I had that in here at one point. I guess I removed it. But today we say, how do you build this component? And even that, like we're not trying to at one point Wash tried to like own the whole world and be like your super toolchain builder for all the things. And we quickly learned like that's just never gonna work. These toolchains are gonna evolve independent of us, external to us, and really all we really want to know is where's your component at? So basically the build step is to feed us the information we need to get a component. And then the dev step is to give us a developer loop where we can just basically spin up a host that's special purposed for being able to do local development, have the right size plugins by default for it, but also make it customizable so that you can specify fields for that host. So your dev section is very much about describing a host that is a developer host. Now, this proposal says, okay, well, there are basically other things that we'd want to pass to describe what we want to run when we're developing this component effectively. And so I definitely waffled a little bit on like, should I fold this up underneath dev or should I make this its own section? And I ultimately, what I'm proposing here is to have it in its own section called workload. And then within that section, just basically giving a simple way for us to pull in from a file, from a literal, or from environment variables, config and secrets. And still making it so that we can basically also be very in line with ultimately what it would look like if we were to pass these fields through and synthesize what a workload deployment will ultimately be. But I do want to make it like really clear that While that is, a goal that I can do kind of a one-to-one translation, it is not specifically that this is Kubernetes. Like the goal here is very much to just keep this contained to a really nice configuration for a developer. So you don't have to be deeply familiar with Kubernetes to look at this and know what that means. So that's a very key design goal as well. And so essentially, we will map some of the things one to one. So this is kind of like how those line up. And what we pass in, I threw in, and I just like kind of had Claude actually go and help me find a lot of existing security conversations, like where are the dragons at here? Let's make sure we do this right. And got a kind of a high level sketch for that. I have a couple open questions here that I welcome feedback on. I appreciate Aditya, you already kind of jumping in. I want to make sure that we go ahead and just kind of agree on it because I think this is something that people need right now. And if we get agreement on this and alignment, then I would say let's go ahead and like add it to the wasmCloud roadmap and get it rolling. Um, so now questions, concerns? I'm opening the floor. And let me drop this link in the chat.
No, yeah, I think that would solve my problem at least. So
Are you disappointed that I made it so big? Because I think you thought you were gonna have like a quick little diff, and then I'm like, yo, Colin, check this out.
no, it's fine. Yeah, I mean, I knew it was I mean, I kind of knew it was thorny. I didn't quite understand fully how thorny it was, but or how much there was to it. But yeah, I mean, it was like let's just say without Claude, I might have given up. Like because it's like okay, well then I've got to have this whole I have to put another full. I mean, because I was working in C++, right?
Hmm.
So not the usual path. And so I had to put have that whole like host configuration section that a new so it was a new wit, right? It was a new bindings generated header file, and then calling that function. Nothing crazy hard, but it was it let's just say it would have taken me like some time if it not for AI to just work through what I had to write. So nothing. I mean, it wasn't. It would be. Can imagine that many people working would run into this very similar path. So I think it's important to address.
Yeah, and in the near term for sure. Yeah, Frank.
So I was wondering about secrets,
Hmm.
and somehow, even in dev, I think we should be very careful with those things because you never know when those things are gonna move up to the chain. So I don't know if there's a better method just to say, okay, no, nothing that could compromise should be there.
I mean, honestly, it's why I took the punt to begin with, like why we scoped it out originally. Because I want to do the right thing there. I want to highlight, you guys probably have all heard the Vercel incident that happened that like very recently. It was literally because you can get to the environment variable that was brought through from their approach. So um, don't we I think there are some clear guardrails that we can put in that will keep us safe. There are other approaches that I did consider. And I am interested in feedback for if people have tried this out. It honestly spooked me a little and I decided to eschew it from the design, but some people who do full GitOps shops, they use SOPs from Mozilla and they basically encrypt it and commit it. Um, Now that's an interesting approach because, then it is always there, but then you know that people can't like decrypt it. Now you're protecting that API key. It's nice in that if somebody was like a full GitOps shop, they might be into that, and maybe we could consider putting that behind a flag. I just felt like that could also potentially be bringing in too much scope and be asking for trouble. But letting people put environment variables like a .env file is its own kind of risk in that now this is a super common pattern, right? Everybody has like dir env and other different approaches like that a lot of people are familiar with. But that is like when you go and look at the swath of types of CVs that have happened in the space, committing your env file is like one of the most common ways to let secrets get out. But I think there's some guardrails that we can add that are pretty nice. Aditya calls us out about making sure that we're not referencing things that are outside of the project root scope. The second one is making sure that it is in git ignore. So like anytime we're told to go load this file and then it's like not actually part of the git repo, we can be like, yo, hey, you might not want to commit this. So there are certainly things that we can add, and the reality is that that is basically still the expectation, I think. Like I think the SOPs approach is still more emerging, and people are going to prefer the .env approach, and we're going to have to take quite a bit of care to do that correctly.
Yeah. So Billy, you mentioned guardrails. So how are those guardrails enforced?
Yeah, it would be for the most part enforced directly in our wash CLI, right? So adding a check to say that this is basically it needs to be in git ignore if we're loading an env file for a secret. Adding a check to say that it's part of the project root, that we're not like loading files or symlinks, off on the disk. That's really also just to protect us from like LLM trying to be able to do traversals. Nowadays, that's like another whole new vector that we have to consider. The other side of it is very much like it is still the developers might commit this, so that is the scary bit. The second part here, though, is that we've added the ability to basically bring in these as environment variables. So somebody could use dir-env or their own, shell and have it exported as an environment variable, and then we will take care within our wash CLI that we never write this to disk, right? So like all of this for us is in memory and we load it. And so probably for at least my shop, what I plan to do is to do all of these as references to environment variables that are loaded external to this process.
Yeah, because even if we I mean have this section in terms of secret and so forth, nothing precludes somebody to give a different name and still put this kind of information. So this is why I think that the guardrails that actually concern, so do you have secrets there and so forth, and it will be easily bypassed.
Well, one of the things that helps us is that we do recognize that this type is of type secret. Now, if they go and put it in the config section as an environment variable, yes, they would just be able to go. And that's part of the reason why I actually brought in secrets into scope for this is specifically to prevent people from YOLOing in dev treating things that are secrets as regular environment variables. So like what strengthens us and what makes us better than a lot of these other projects that exist is that we literally are typing it. We're saying like, oh no, this is a type secret. We're never going to write it to a log or anything else. It is typed as a secret and we have to treat it as such. And config and environment variables, you treat them that way too. I honestly would probably treat it all, as carefully as I could, but yeah, I think there are more guardrails here than like some of the more layman tools that exist on the market today.
Yeah, probably would be interesting to have at least a link to some page say, okay, those are best practice, avoid doing this, that, and so forth, because then it becomes the application developer responsibility.
Yeah, let's go ahead and just call that out.
And I'll add that we have a workload security page in PR that I think would be a good candidate for including some of this.
Cool. Any other comments on this one? All right. Well, I think I'm gonna leave it open maybe for like the rest of today, but um and then I'll turn it to ready for work. Just want to give it some time, make sure we get some feedback before we just like dive in, but I think hopefully I've got enough information here where basically I think anybody could pick it up and happy to code review that. So let's jump over to our wasmCloud roadmap. So what we're actively working on right now is quite a lot of things. Um, last week we talked about microbenchmarking. What I've been working on is trying to get us infrastructure to use for that so that we can reliably reproduce what I'm getting locally on Bailey's old gaming machine and Bailey's MacBook. Let's do something a little bit better than that. I tried out a tool called Bencher, but for open source, it is only 5 minutes, which is not enough time for me to run my benches. So right now I'm playing around with setting us up with Hetzner and getting us a bare metal box that we can run this type of work on it. This PR is in a good place if folks want to review it, but I I've also now added an IOPS Valgrind bench as well, so that we can get a little bit more deterministic CPU-based counts, which I would want to include in our comprehensive benchmark suite. So again, my area of focus is still very much on the micro benchmark side of this world. I would we want to add K6 benchmarks, that would be actually hitting us from and involving more of a network based and bringing in, Kubernetes and our controller into scope as well. Nobody's working on that right now. But that would be a cool thing if somebody wanted to work on that. We're still tracking WASI P3. We're tracking some of our install stuff. So last week we talked about the proposal to do automated releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. We did some kind of like maintenance work around that where we now have WinGit in the Windows Package Manager official piece. So the next time we trigger a release, it should automatically publish straight there for WinGit. And then Dan went and updated us to basically, instead of using muzzle, link with glibc so that when we build on Linux, you can get all the web GPU good that people depend on. Now, that is not in the homebrew version yet, but earlier this week we made the change to make it so that when we publish our next version, in theory, that will all just work, and it'll link up the right Linux brew package, which would be glibc. So that's some of the stuff in the works, and then I think it's probably worth. We've got the HTTP client plugin, which is I'm gonna click this and see where it takes me. This is another one that we wanted to talk through. Aditya, do you mind taking this one?
Yeah. So this is based on a comment that I left. I think I've mentioned it somewhere in the chat. So currently, when we build the test fixtures, they get built even when we use Wasm, the watch runtime create downstream. We want to prevent that, and for that, I thought it would be a hypothetical idea that why not add a ghost crate, non-published, of course, keeping it on the dev side and referencing it as a dev dependency so that we don't have to depend on an X task, a workflow, or a just file. And cargo build just picks up on the build.rs on the dev dependency only on cargo test. And I think dman OS, he actually built he created a pull request for this. But we also had another version which uses the X task, I believe. I just wanted to get opinions on which I think it's the top three, as the first and the third. So which one of these do we go for?
Opinions, folks? I will be straight up. I did take a first blush at this on trying to do it with, basically setting cargo config flags, and that just totally falls apart. Because it's not always clear when it actually needs to be built if you're running cargo bench or you're running all these other things. So I think that approach doesn't work. So now we're discussing two potential ideas. One would be having it be an external task, but then that means that when people just run cargo test, it might not work. They actually have to know about doing some other thing. Now, I am getting dangerous in my Rust, but I don't feel like I could, authoritatively tell you what the idiomatic approach is for this. So I also really want feedback from outside folks on what we think is the right approach here. It is definitely biting people, especially since we've had 3 or 4 people take a swing. Must be important. So I do definitely want us to get a solution in quickly. And also, D-Man, thanks for being awesome. And I actually don't know your real name, but D-Man's that's a pretty sweet handle. And thank you for being awesome and trying a couple different approaches, putting things up so we can decide.
Because the ghost crate approach, like having a sidecar crate, it's definitely a bit unusual, I would say. It was just something that popped up in my mind, having the approach of having a dev dependency not getting compiled at all downstream or in a cargo build, which is why I proposed it, but I'm a bit afraid.
And there is the other kinds of prior art that I'm aware of. Obviously, we could take a look at exactly what wasmTime is doing here, where it also just has a ton of test programs that it builds and does it all via build.rs. And I think this basically is the same as us on our current approach. I think I literally told Claude to look at this and kind of follow it. But I want to do the right thing. So please give us feedback. And I'm not going to chime in on it if you don't mind, Aditya, for like maybe another day-ish. Hopefully other people can
No, that's fine.
come in.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
no, I get it. I get it. It's fine.
Sweet. Yeah. I'm not sure. You had made a Ghost Crate already, right? I mean, you had made a version of this that was working fairly well, that refactored this last week, I want to say, right? Am I crazy?
I think it was the consolidation of everything in the target directory, a parent target
Yeah.
directory.
Yeah, that was nice. And that worked really well. Oh wow, we've had a lot come in. It's in here somewhere. This one. Yeah. So doing this single virtual workspace, I thought was a great improvement. It's similar, right? It's definitely in the vein. So if folks are chiming in, probably also take a look at some of this as prior art as well. All right.
I had something else that I
Oh
wanted to
yeah, go
bring up.
ahead.
It's about the WASI TLS, the
Hmm.
O3 implementation. Are we including that in our Q2 roadmap, or is that a bit far ahead? But
Well,
something I've already thought of picking that up.
I knew you were into it, so I went ahead and created the issue. Um, uh, so I saw it when I did the wasmTime 44 upgrade. And you had mentioned it before, that they had already added it as something that is already there. Dave Baker has been working on that in the wasmTime side, and I think if we put up all the signal flares like experimental, might change, all the things. I'm totally game to bring it in. I would like to treat it kind of like how we treat WebGPU, where it's very much an opt-in feature, because I expect it to potentially change, and it is not, it's not even a phase 2 yet. So that's like super early for in terms of WASI proposals. Especially since it's something that touches something in a security context, then I really want to like signal flare all the things around it. But I think it is generally something that's ready for work. So if we give it all those caveats, I think getting and exercising it and providing implementation feedback for the standard is like the best thing we can do as community stewards. Um, what do folks think? Well, I'm not hearing any dissent, so Aditya, I'll go ahead and add this.
Sounds good.
like practically speaking, what would WASI TLS give us in wasmCloud?
You would be able to basically have TLS on your socket.
Okay.
I think that's
But
good.
yeah, it is good, but I'm just like somebody needs to draw me a picture here. So like since wasmCloud runs inside Kubernetes,
Mm.
and we're going to use Kubernetes services, right? So this would just terminate the SSL at the component.
So when, like for the product I work on, right, we do TLS termination with our reverse proxy, which is super common. It's how most people do it. You can do it for your ingress and egress, and that's great. Now with wasmCloud, we are very our main effort, of course, is having the best experience possible on Kubernetes because that's where most of our users are. But we are compatible with, but not dependent upon
Okay.
Kubernetes. So if
All right.
somebody wants to build their own host and enable this flag and do TLS termination in the host, I'm not going to stop them. Let's give them the picks and shovels to do the right thing for their use
Okay.
case.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is kind of, I mean, I don't know. It's been a little while since I was in the Kubernetes space, but there was stuff around mutual TLS and service meshes with Istio and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's, if you're doing a production deploy and you're doing it in Kubernetes, that's the way to do it.
So would this allow us to join?
You,
Would WASI TLS allow for mutual TLS? No.
no.
All right.
Well, I mean, you could do it in your host implementation and then
Right.
you would kind of, but that would all be built into your custom host that you're building versus doing TLS termination over on the service mesh side. So I would say these two approaches are almost orthogonal.
Yeah. I was just trying to think my way through it.
It's a
Okay.
good
So
call.
if you're not doing Kubernetes and you want to terminate at the component level or specify certificates at the component level at least, I mean, the termination is still happening in the host,
Yep.
then you can do that. This will allow you to do that. All right.
You still can do that. You can, for instance, I mean, most API gateways, of course, they have a pass-through that
Right.
you can terminate your TLS on your component.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, it's been with WASI TLS, I was like, it doesn't solve my cryptography problems. Don't care. Perfect.
Yeah,
That's
no, that's exactly the case.
my internal monologue. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. I mean, other people have definitely been pushing for it. So I was just trying to put like, okay, I get what roughly you're trying to do. How does that relate to wasmCloud? Okay.
Well, one reason why I'm interested in it is that there is a suite of tests in C Python that are socket TLS tests. And so
Yeah.
I'm interested in just getting green passing for the Python ecosystem from their test perspective to do as minimal amount of work that they need to do. Because when a lot of people are implementing the WebAssembly WASI APIs, like even WASI-http, some of them are still layering it on top of still a sockets kind of backend. And so if this makes it easier for them to get something working to start, and then they could maybe take advantage of it being a high level API later, awesome, right? Like let's just get as many things onboarded as we can. And we probably wouldn't actually use it. And
Yeah.
like I wouldn't probably use it, but that's
And
okay.
isn't there is man, I'm so sorry you'll have to listen to me try to remember things. UREC, that happens at the socket level, right?
Oh boy. Uh, so Dave put together a pretty nice in his markdown. That's probably what I would pull up for how he talks about what he converted.
Okay.
Um,
So what Rust crates can we now support with WASI TLS?
hmm, good question. Anybody know? I think right now he's focused on the host implementation. I don't think he's actually gone and tried to make a swing on any of the guest implementations because again, phase one, so nobody would depend on it
Yeah.
right away. He went and did it for, I think, .NET end to end with WASI TLS because the .NET team needed it. And theirs is a pretty comprehensive implementation, but not what you care about, Colin, because obviously you don't do .NET
Well,
C#.
and also if we're gonna be like put your slop in Rust and then into a Wasm component. But I think UREC does work on the socket layer, and it's blocking, so it's making a bunch of system calls, whereas request is not, right? So maybe we can get request.
I mean, if you look at this API, y'all, you'll see what I mean. It just basically kind of complements an existing socket connection, and it is the world's smallest API service.
Well, I think that's a challenge. I think it's a challenge to get UREC. It's always been a thing, right? You want to get these HTTP libraries that everybody uses to work, right?
Yes.
And I think for some of them, you have to
It's crypto.
do it at the socket layer.
Well, we're gonna need WASI crypto. I think like ultimately that's the thing that needs to exist to really enable more of the ecosystem coming online. For what it's worth, I did get a chance to talk to Merlin Sabrek's research group, and they have a PhD student there that is interested in actually driving forward and doing more research on WASI crypto in particular and getting that revved with WASI P3. So I'm gonna stay on top of that as best I can. They've been doing great work out of that group for doing hardware level interfaces. I don't know if you've been following that. That group proposed SPI, USB, I2C, etc. So they've got the chops to build out different types of WASI proposals and implementations. So
yeah,
yeah,
good. I mean, you definitely would want to be using the hardware accelerated stuff for ECC and stuff like that. And so yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a pretty big effort.
Yeah. Other things that are on the roadmap that are kind of in flight, I just flipped it over this morning because Dan Phillips here, new contributor to wasmCloud, has been also new member at Cosmonic, has been taking a look at doing the implementation and design for host components. So just so folks are aware that that's starting out.
Yep.
Yeah,
One thing
Aditya.
for the lack of things to do, it would be nice to run regression tests on the wasmCloud docs because let's say the Kubernetes stuff it's still pointing to 2.03 and I tried just for the sake of it and it's not working. I didn't debug it, but just FYI. When I did the Helm part, it failed. So it shouldn't fail. It should. I mean, it should be
Sure.
everything should be open and so forth. But it was saying that somehow I wasn't authorized or authenticated to get access to something.
Yeah, we've
Wonder
got a
what
PR in right now, I believe, bringing that up to 204, but it's a good thing to bring up.
Thanks, Eric.
Eric, do you have off the top of your head what that might have been? Why there would be a not authorized? I would think maybe, I'm not sure we've made any changes in that space.
Yeah, not off the top of my head. Have to follow up.
I think on 2.03 there was a bug. Well, I don't think it was with the default values though, but it was around the ingress. And if you had a flag enabled underneath the ingress, that it would possibly create an invalid YAML around the role binding. But that was fixed in 2.04. So I think if we just update the docs for 2.04 and then follow 2.04 steps, that should work.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's a cool idea though about using the docs to drive the test, right? Cargo has that with cargo examples. I guess one other thing that's worth calling out in that domain, I did put up this PR. I think anybody that's willing to review it, it is big, for a regression that Eric had found, and I kind of went all out on doing a full testing pyramid for this flow, just because it was a race condition that was really, really hard to capture. And so I did it, I added basically different types of regression coverage for different layers. And the final one ultimately being a full cluster spinning up with a messaging round trip with TLS enabled. So, and that and all of that refactor was actually to also make sure before we ever publish an image to Canary even that we're doing this full validation end to end. But it isn't going through the docs. Those are decoupled today. Aditya?
It's about the host component plugins. If essentially, we're going to take all the present native plugins that are present for the host and get them to compile to WASI v3 in so they support the sandbox model. Won't all the plugins that we have currently need to have the v3 support built into them? And moreover, if we are going to be implementing the raw WASI v3 plugins, will we need a helper crate that has all the correct abstractions, all the encapsulated types, so that all those host components can be built in a reusable manner? Because I think that's going to take quite a bit of developmental effort.
Yeah, I mean, I consider this very much a large t-shirt sized feature. Like I think it's going to take a lot of this quarter. For the first part, I actually think it's out of scope to try to convert all of our existing native plugins. We're always going to have support for native plugins. WebGPU is a great example where it's taking advantage of hardware level APIs. That's just never something that we're going to put in a component. And I think when people are building out their own hosts, there are advantages to being able to have, like super user access to things, right? You can control and create your own threads and YOLO. So I think that always has to exist. And one of the reasons why we wanted to get started on this early is definitely that a lot of people want to just do effectively clients. Like a lot of the major requests that we're getting for a lot of these plugins is just make clients. Oh, yeah, you just linked it exactly in chat. And part of the reason we were talking about this was also, Jeremy's been looking into like expanding out clients to other ways to talk to other services like Vault directly to get secrets. Same thing, it's a client. Like and only that, not only that, but yeah, we really do want that sandboxed. I think if people are interested in converting them after we get some of this infrastructure, maybe. But I'm saying native plugins is still continue to exist, including the ones that we already have. And I agree with you. There's going to be a lot of SDK tooling to make your own host component plugin building good. Yeah, Aditya.
And also, if we are going to make clients, does it make sense to be making the WIT interfaces for them? If a component can just do the call in itself, does it make sense to offload it to a client component? Because like the one I've linked in chat, I'm also building the wasmCloud NATS interface. Does it make sense for me to continue making that, or just depend on the client?
So this question comes up, so it's good that we're hashing it out. For the same reason that people actually argue, like, do you really need a wasmCloud secrets interface when I could just do this on an environment variable? And the fact is, yeah, you can just do it on an environment variable. You lose types, and you also lose the ability to extend it and enrich the context. And so if you want types and you want to build SDKs on top of those rich types, then you probably do want to build your own WIT interface, especially if you're building an ecosystem around it and you, the platform admin, are tightly controlling how these things work. And once you've created the WIT interface, you can also do composition with that interface. So if you're interested in doing some kind of like chaining of that API, then that's another good candidate. However, It comes with downsides because it's more complex. It is going to require you to maybe even provide, while bindings with WebAssembly interface types are pretty good, and we strive really hard to make it feel idiomatic to that language across all the different languages. And one of the things we say is it gives you SDKs for free. But sometimes that's not quite exactly right in that I've found in practice, most people generate their SDKs and then add a little bit of niceness, glue on top. And so there's probably a cost there to consider. Um, I think my general answer is that Nats is kind of special in this scenario because you're talking about trying to provide an API that's probably going to have some connection pooling. It's probably going to want to do some stateful operations, some client-side cache, server-side cache. Like when you start talking about all the affordances that you want to add for Jetstream, there's a lot of opportunity to enrich that context, and that's where a WIT API would be really nice to have. And if you're just making a client and if the client is HTTP, my opinion is probably not WIT. My opinion is probably just do wasi-http because we've got streaming built in, we've got back buffering built in, it's got load balancing built in. They probably already have a really nice HTTP SDK already provided for whatever language, right? Upstream by somebody else. And because we've been, over the past couple of years, upstreaming wasi-http to all these language SDKs, things that they're already familiar with, they're already building with, just work TM. And so I wouldn't want to change that on the guests that are using it. So if you're doing HTTP, I probably would just do a WASI-http host component. If you're doing basically not that, then like something that's doing its own socket level protocol like NATS, then you might want to choose to enrich it.
Really appreciate it. I'll just keep working on it then. Thank you.
But it's a good call. And I honestly think people are going to choose different things, right? Like both can exist. That's kind of the point, right? Whatever starts working really well for people, that's kind of the direction I think we should evolve. So yeah. Well, I think that's it for the items that I wanted to call out, and kind of our roadmap status. Any other topics folks want to cover before we end the call? All right. Well, thanks again for the awesome discussion, y'all, and see you next week.